Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Pastatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
So, for those of you who are just arriving, His Grace Panchatattva Prabhu is going to be giving class tonight. Maharaj is engaged with a professor in Hawaii, and so he's not available. He didn't want to put an end point on his meeting with him. You know, they were having a nice discussion, so he asked for someone else to take over the class, and Panchatattva Prabhu is available and kindly consented to give class. And thank you all for being here. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can use the raise hand function. You can type it in the chat box, but please don't type it in the chat box while Panchatattva Prabhu is reading from the chat box, because it has a tendency to move things around. Did I leave anything out?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Prabhu.
Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privrajacharya Stotra Satoshi Shimad. Divine Grace Shila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Vibrajacharya Stotra Sata Sri Srimad Divine Grace of the Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai, Sri Caitanya Charitamrta Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande. So we're in the first chapter of Sri Caitanya Charitamrta Adi Lila, the chapter concerning the spiritual masters. We've been reading a number of verses about glories of the spiritual master, that particular manifestation of Godhead called the spiritual master. And we've come to verse 60. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshuru Mritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stavitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadab Mahyam Dadati Swabadantikam Vande Ham Shri Guru Shri Utapar Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragana Tanbitam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Name Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Prachayane Nirvishesha Shunibhari Paschadya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is verse 60 of the first chapter of Caitanya Charitamrta. The verse also appears in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 25th chapter. It's a famous verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Satam prasangan mama virya sangbidho bhavanti ritkarna rasayana kata chaj joshanad asvapavarga vartmani shradharatir bhaktir anukramishyati. Translation. The spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in the society of devotees, and it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens, and gradually one attains firm faith, then in due course develops into attraction and devotion. Purport. This verse appears in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-25, where Kapila Dev replies to the questions of his mother Devahuti about the process of devotional service. As one advances in devotional activities, the process becomes progressively clearer and more encouraging. Unless one gets this spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. Therefore, one's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. Initially, one must develop confidence by hearing the science of devotion from a qualified spiritual master. Then, as he associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life, his misgivings and other obstacles are vanquished by his execution of devotional service. Strong attachment for the transcendental service of the Lord develops as he continues listening to the messages of Godhead, and if he steadfastly proceeds in this way, he is certainly elevated to spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's one of the nice things that I've noticed about these transcendental literatures is you can find a Sanskrit verse in one place and the translation presents a certain angle of vision, a certain taste, a certain realization, and then you see the same verse quoted in another place, and it's worded a slightly different way that illuminates the meaning of the verse a little differently and clearly in yet another aspect. It's really nice about these wonderful books that Srila Prabhupada's given us. And in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 25th chapter, we find this verse, and the translation is given in this way. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. So it's another angle, emphasizing when this devotional service really blossoms and becomes something that's moving forward. We get that, at least I get that from this purport too, that number one, one's advancement really hinges on taking shelter of a saintly person, a spiritual master, and receiving encouragement from him. That encouragement moves him along, and without that, Prabhupada says here, unless one gets this spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. That's how critical a role the spiritual master plays in one's spiritual life. It's a matter of being essential. It's an essential factor. It's not, as Prabhupada has explained many places in his books, it's not simply a matter of book knowledge or rote learning or a knowledge of facts, figures, statistics. It's a matter of imbibing the spiritual culture in the association of devotees. And then Prabhupada says this, as one develops confidence by hearing the science of devotion from a qualified spiritual master, he then associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life. So this is that process of transformation, following the instructions of the spiritual master, adapting them into one's own life, rising early, chanting 16 rounds, associating with devotees, following the program, the morning program, worshiping the deity, hearing transcendental literatures regularly, and then in such an encouraged position, he shares that knowledge with others. This is the glories of the Krishna consciousness movement, that encouragement spills over. If someone is actually making advancement, they can't hold that gift in. They want to give it to others. They want to share, That's actually one of the marks of a devotee who's making advancement. He's not curled up with the books. He's not hiding out from the rest of the world, like I feel I've been for the last 2 years. He's making every effort to share this knowledge with others. We were fortunate to have His Grace Caritamrta Prabhu and his wife Ruchira Mataji here this afternoon for some evening prasadam. And it was a great blessing because Caritamrta has been on the front lines of book distribution since anyone can remember. And to this day, he's doing it, always inspiring people and bringing them to Krishna House in Gainesville. And his efforts have meant that people get a chance to understand who Krishna is. Prabhupada explains elsewhere, I think it's actually in this verse, it may be in this purport, 3:25-25. Yes. that it's actually very difficult to understand Krishna as a person because people are automatically inclined to an impersonal understanding. They think it's just a mythology or some pleasant stories, but they can't penetrate because they haven't had the contact of a saintly person that can help them understand the reality of the Lord's position and the reality of their position as a servant. No service mood can arise without contact with a servant of the Lord. This is the mystery of the disciplic succession. This is how it works. Service breeds service, not only in oneself, but in others, because we don't serve alone. It's been explained elsewhere in our classes that there are two classes of Transcendentalists, the Bhajanandis and the Goshtyanandis. The Bhajanandis are, as we've heard, inclined to solitary meditation on the Lord. The Goshtyanandis, they carry the message of the Lord with them wherever they go and share it with whomever they meet. Yari Tari Krishna Upadesh. They share that message of Krishna consciousness wherever and whomever they meet. So in that mode, one can actually flourish as a devotee and make spiritual advancement. This purport that I was referencing, 3:25:25, discusses this a little bit more in depth. As I mentioned, generally people are convinced of the impersonal feature of the Absolute. Because they do not associate with devotees, they cannot understand that the Absolute Truth can be a person and have personal activities. This is a very difficult subject matter. And unless one has personal understanding of the Absolute Truth, there is no meaning to devotion. Service or devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literature wherein the activities of the Lord are described. They think that these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. Very interesting. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. And by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path to liberation is open and he is freed. And it goes on like that. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. He makes association in this way, and he gradually becomes perfect. So, in the Nectar of Devotion, that verse is there, Adao tata sadhu sangat bhajana kriya tata narta navritya syat tata nishtaru chishtata. Everything begins with faith. And how does one develop that faith? He hears from someone. Now, hearing from a book is also there. Even though Prabhupada has said here that just reading the Bhagavatam, that a non-devotee won't be able to penetrate, there's something very mystical about Prabhupada's books where those Bhaktivedanta purports make it possible to actually have some understanding. How many devotees we've known who've gotten books, and as a result of getting the books, they seek out the devotees. Their faith is it's invoked. I know one devotee who he found a book in the middle of the woods. It was a Krishna book, and it was in tatters. And how he came across it is, he was like walking his dog, and he found a Krishna book in the woods, discarded and rather torn up. And he read the book, and he went to the temple and became a devotee. So that's how unusual an introduction to Krishna consciousness can be, because of the mercy of the words of Srila Prabhupada in his books. At the same time, in order to understand Prabhupada's books, we associate with devotees, particularly saintly persons. It's interesting that in this section of Bhagavatam, where Kapila Dev is he's explaining to Devahuti the glories of devotional service, which is what the chapter is appropriately titled. Up to this verse, Satam Prasangan Mamavirya Samvido Bhavantirit Karna Rasayana Kata, that we've been discussing, he talks about, in the preceding several verses, the qualities of a saintly person, essentially the qualities of a spiritual master. I thought I would share just some of the translations. There's, of course, 3:25-21, a very famous verse, Titikshava Karunika, that verse, where Kapila Deva explains to his mother Devahuti that the symptoms of a sadhu are that he's tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He's peaceful. He abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. Such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. For the sake of the Lord, he renounces all other connections, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. O my mother, O virtuous lady, these are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So those are the several verses leading up. The purports are wonderful and well worth reading. And so we get a glimpse in a very concise way via Lord Kapila Dev what the qualities are of a saintly person and indeed a bona fide spiritual master. He has these qualities. He's not disturbed by material attachments. He renounces all connections to this material world, all worldly connections. His personal characteristics are just completely enchanting. He's tolerant, merciful, friendly to every living being. He's peaceful. He's not inimical to anyone. So like that, Krishna, the devotee, it's said that the jiva can have up to 78% of the qualities of the personality of Godhead, Krishna. So those 78% are manifested in different ways. We know from reading that Lord Brahma has the most manifest portion of that 78% of qualities. But here, these qualities are especially wonderful because I've often thought about this, when you read about the characteristics of Krishna, his wonderful loving attitude towards the gopis, towards the residents of Vrindavan, his kindness in appearing as a super soul in everyone's heart, his desire to see the living entities, the fallen conditioned souls reclaimed, to go back home, back to Godhead, to become freed, liberated from the suffering and the bondage of this material world. You see those same qualities manifest in a pure devotee. They're right there. You see the same personality traits, in a matter of speaking. What is it that Lord Jesus said? He said, I and the Father are one. Well, that was perhaps somewhat misinterpreted to say, oh, he's God. But really the mission of the spiritual master and the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are one and the same. So, therefore, the spiritual master is referred to as the personality of servitor Godhead. He's given all the respect, appreciation, veneration, as if he were the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the same time, it's understood that he's this humble servant of the Lord. Probably gave the example of the viceroy. He would come to India, and he would be received by the dignitaries and government officials of India with the same respect and veneration as if he were the king or the queen of England. The idea being that this person is the via medium of the seat of government of India, of England, and therefore he's vested with the full authority of that government seat. So in the same way, the spiritual master appears in this world to present the message of Godhead, and it is our opportunity to render service to such a bona fide spiritual master and make advancement in this way, because by that encouragement received from the spiritual master and saintly persons who have understood the message of Godhead, we progress on the path of devotional service. So, are there any comments or questions? Would anybody like to say something?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, so happy to hear from you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was just thinking early on, the word encouragement comes up
Yeah.
in regard to the disciple getting encouragement from the spiritual master. And I was thinking how that practically feels and how it manifests, that when you hear from authority and you respond to the person's words with an internal affirmative that yes, not only does this make sense, but it sounds good and it's attractive to me and it sounds like something that I'd like to do. And not only that, it sounds like something that I can do, because when you see the person in front of you that you're inspired by, you think, well, he's done it. I can too. So I like that very much. And there's some other things I wanted to say, but I'm sure you've got other.
No, say some more.
Oh, well, I really appreciated you reading the 325:25, where Prabhupada translates it by saying, thereafter he is freed. By
Yeah.
cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced. It reminds me of a class I heard one time in Boston from Muktivandya Prabhu. Very, very sincere preacher. And I remember him saying to the few of us that were in that class that, don't you understand? You're sitting here hearing Bhagavad Gita, you're chanting the Lord's name, you're free! You're free! He got very, very excited. And you just felt that coming off of him, that, yeah, well, I don't know what that means, but if you say so, I guess I'm free.
That was really nice. Anything else?
Well, you were also saying that it's not a matter of book knowledge or rote learning, actually becoming advanced. And I think of so many of us who are curled up with the Srimad Bhagavatam and hiding ourselves away for some time. But you brought up, as you're amplifying the Prabhupada's statements there, that it's really comes down to an active relationship of service to the spiritual master. That's where you really get traction. It's an analogy just came to mind. It's like when you're not going to drive a car for a while, you put it up on blocks so that the wheels aren't touching the ground. And I feel, and almost since this pandemic has taken things over, that a lot of us have been up on blocks, and the idea of putting the wheels back down on the ground so that they can do what they're meant to do is refreshing.
Yeah. I was thinking about that expression, "He is free." That sentence is, to understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees, and by such association, one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. The path to liberation is open, and he is freed. This is really talking about a very beginning point in one's spiritual life. It's a beginning point. Now, an analogy came to mind. There's one place where it's like crossing to the spiritual world. It's described, or crossing the ocean of nescience, or crossing to the spiritual world. It's like the boat and there's favorable breezes and so forth. And I was thinking of a sailing ship. When it's anchored, it's not moving. You may have the sails up and it's not moving. But when that anchor is pulled up, at first there's hardly any motion. It appears that nothing has happened. But over a period of time, if the sails are set right and the man at the tiller knows what he's doing, then he starts moving more and more and more and more rapidly. So spiritual life can kind of seem like that, you know. At first, you know, I mean, when I joined the temple, I was just, you know, ogle-eyed at everybody thinking, these people are really busy. I'm brand new. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with my spiritual life? But as that association thickened, I could actually feel that progress is being made. And the first thing I noticed is exactly the first thing that's described about chanting Hare Krishna, that your material distress diminishes, you know? So that was a sign, maybe for me, not for many future lifetimes, but anyway, that was a sign that there's a chance for the soul. Here's the opportunity. You're actually freed. You're beginning your motion on the path of devotional service. Now stick to it. Don't get stuck on the rocks. Don't steer yourself off course by listening to the bad association of non-devotees. Stay the course. Stay the course. Yeah, I like that. He is freed. Wonderful. Anybody else? Anything in that chat box?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Vijay Krishna Prabhu has a question. In accordance with the purport, different stages are mentioned. Develop confidence by hearing, association, adopt the means, misgivings are vanquished, attachment, spontaneous love. So, my question is, common people with the forefront of knowledge may find it difficult to adopt such a path, which is filled with all the required progressive steps. They may want something less difficult, less demanding, and less congregational. Should they be dismissed or encouraged? Of course they should be encouraged. Devotional service is such a, there's the thing that you learn when you visit an ISKCON center, if you're perceptive, is that there is no lack of variegatedness in the spiritual world. There is room for persons who are not so inclined to be gregarious or, as you say, congregational. There is room for persons who want to meet everyone they can possibly meet and get to know them and spread the word of Krishna consciousness. There's so many services, so many activities that can be performed. And the thing about Krishna consciousness is that in the beginning, at least from my experience and from the experience of many, many others that I've spoken with, we're not put off. We're not put off by hearing and chanting about Krishna. We're certainly not put off by Krishna Prasadam. We're not put off by kirtan. We're not bewildered by saintly association. We're not necessarily repelled by the beauty of the deities. All of these things are attractive. And they can become more attractive over time. Sometimes when a devotee first comes to Krishna consciousness, as in my case, they may have second thoughts. I certainly did. After a few weeks in the temple, I just joined. I just came to the temple and joined. And a few weeks later, I thought, wow, did I take the plunge too soon? And then a really nice devotee shared some passages from Srimad Bhagavatam with me. And I felt really satisfied. I thought, no, I should stick with this. I should stick with it. The problem is that what's really pulling us away from devotional service is material desire and janasangha, the association of worldly people, which we had been so long in the middle of. It takes a little practice, it takes a little endeavor to pull away from bad association and supplant it with good association. It does take a little bit of determination to stay away from all of the objects of our desires that we had been cultivating since time immemorial that were really bad for us. So yeah, there's that. But any endeavor for something wonderful requires that kind of a kind of austerity, a kind of determination, a kind of renunciation from other things. You know, if someone goes to college and he sits in his room and plays video games instead of attending his classes, he's not going to get the desired result of going to college. You know, if someone goes to work and lounges by the water cooler, I don't know if they still have those in workplaces, but anyway, even people aren't even going to to work, but they're working from home. But if they don't get their work done, they won't get the desired result of their employment. So the same is true of Krishna consciousness in that respect. It requires some determination. Those progressive steps also are not necessarily like one step getting bigger than the other. They're steps which, by the grace of the spiritual master, one can be empowered to take. That's another thing that advanced devotees tell us, that you take this step, the next step you can take. The next step you can take. When the spiritual master gives an instruction, just as Caitanya Prabhu was alluding to earlier, you feel encouraged. And with that encouragement, you make progress. And you can actually accomplish that instruction. That's the marvel of devotional service. And if you read any books about the early devotees in particular, you can read about how very early on, devotees were in the most trying situations, and somehow or other, by that firm determination to follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, the obstacles that seemed insurmountable simply fell away. So, those are my reflections on your question.
Yes, Pancha Tattva Das Prabhu, if I may say, wonderful reflections. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
You're welcome, Prabhu.
Would anybody else like to make a comment or share an insight as to this verse and purport? There's a lot here, actually. I'm sorry I haven't glossed it very well, but it's a really nice verse.
Tulsi Priya has a hand up, it looks like.
Yes, Tulsi Priya.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. I'm really relishing this class. Thank you so much for being available to give it. One thing I was thinking, I lost my place in the database here online. Let me see if I can find it. Anyways, one reflection that I had was that Prabhupada, as my husband is often fond of quoting, and Ravindra Shri Prabhu is often fond of quoting, he told his disciples, all of you become just like me. And I was thinking too that a good parent often says is, or a good boss or a good leader, they will often say something like, my job is to make myself superfluous. In other words, you train people, you lead people, you educate people so that they can do what the leader or the parent or the boss or whoever can do. They can stand on their own 2 feet, they can become independent. And the paradox of that is that if it's done with affection and done skillfully, then yes, the person becomes independent and can stand on their own 2 feet, but they always feel that great loyalty and affection for the teacher or the parent or the boss. Why? Because they've internalized what that person has given them. So I feel like when Prabhupada says, all of you become just like me, it's not to supplant him, it's to internalize him. Because, and I was having this conversation with somebody, it's like Prabhupada is our immediate preceptor. Well, not, I mean, we all have gurus, but in one sense, from the point of view of Shiksha and who established everything in our society, we see him as the preceptor. But also with our own gurus, we internalize what they give us, and in a way, we're all meant to become who our guru is for us to other people, even in very small ways. The Vartma Pradarshika guru, or the Shiksha guru, or if somebody goes on to become an initiating guru. It's like we don't lose that connection, and the only way you can really maintain it is to internalize what the guru has given, and not become them in the sense that you're replacing them, but become their representative and manifest those qualities in your own person for somebody else, because the guru can't be everywhere. And that's why there are disciples, because the guru can't be everywhere.
Yeah, that was really nice. Yeah, that's a fact. And Prabhupada always pointed out too, from what I've read, that he would speak of lines of authority, temple president, GBC, and so forth. In our case, we would know, our Sankirtan leader or temple commander. In one sense, they're all representatives of the spiritual master. So one may not always agree with the exact instructions that are being given by this devotee or that devotee, but one should have that understanding that these devotees are all representatives of my spiritual master. And in that way, one can, very importantly, also avoid offenses. That takes us to another subject of being the servant of the servant, which is a pretty encompassing subject, especially amongst devotees, a very important one. Yeah, we're all meant to give Krishna consciousness to others, and by doing that, we also enthuse our teachers, our devotees who are senior to us, our spiritual masters. That enthusiasm actually runs both ways. The spiritual master encourages us, and if we behave in a way that's appropriate according to the instruction of the spiritual master, we give them encouragement and enthusiasm. That's even expressed in the mantras we chant, Gayatri mantra. So yeah, let us behave in that way. Thank you, Mother Tulsi Priya.
A quick follow-up to that.
Yes.
The other thing, this is actually what initiated my train of thought, is that our problem with Krishna, the reason that we're not, with Krishna is a personal issue. Prabhupada uses the expression envy, or the desire to be Krishna, which means we've got a problem with Krishna as a person. He is who he is, and for some reason we don't like it. And the Mahabhagavatas, they see everyone as serving Krishna, and they see everyone as representing Krishna. And so you were bringing up the point of offenses to devotees. It's like, if we can't resolve our problems with the little Krishnas all around us, how can we resolve the problem with the big Krishna? It's something that we have to really work on, and see how Krishna is working through everyone, and to have the discrimination to know when it's Krishna and when it's, but at the same time, even if it's somebody's material attachment or somebody's false ego, Krishna is still working through that person for us. He's still directing us somehow, because even to deal with somebody's false ego, you have to do it in a Krishna conscious way. So I feel like, the more we internalize the spiritual master, it seems to get easier to do that, because you can see Krishna's hand in our dealings with each other. But it's not so easy, because other people's false egos bring out our false egos, and our false egos bring out other people's false egos. I've seen it myself. I think I'm being so Krishna conscious, and then somebody will come at me, and I'll be like, that was your false ego. That's what they're responding to.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. I've had the same experience. Oh yes, today I'm very Krishna conscious, and then something will inevitably trip me up, and my own false ego will flare, and I'll say, "Oh, okay, I see."
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? Hare Krishna. Let's
Hi,
see.
Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah.
Another thing I was thinking of based on this. There's a segment of the purport where Prabhupada is speaking about how it's, I don't know if he uses the word difficult or impossible for non-devotees to penetrate into the subject matter of Krishna consciousness. And I was thinking about, well, what is that? Why does he use that particular verb? What does that mean? And then I started thinking that, just to use the example of Srila Prabhupada, he
Mhm.
would say that he didn't write these books, that Krishna wrote the books, and that his Bhaktivedanta purports are his personal ecstasies. So when he had his little reading lamp on in the middle of the night, he was getting direct dictation from Krishna, and that came out in the form of English words that got printed on a page that got distributed everywhere for people to read. Now, the ability for those people who are reading the words to actually understand where they're coming from, in other words, to penetrate the words, to be able to appreciate the inspiration behind those words, that takes some mercy. It takes the combination of mercy and some kind of proper practice, because if you're in the lower modes and you read something like this, it'll just be gobbledygook. You won't be able to penetrate it. You won't be able to get through it. It'll just go whoosh. Anyway.
Yeah. Association of devotees is so important for approaching these literatures.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice point.
I just want to throw something in on that too. I've mentioned this before, and it's kind of a brag on myself, but when I was a child, I had a very high reading level. I was, like grades and grades beyond my reading level.
Mm.
And when I first came in contact with Srila Prabhupada's books, I was maybe about 10 years old or a little younger. I couldn't understand them, even though the language is not, it's not PhD language in the sense of the vocabulary and the grammar or whatever. I couldn't understand them. I could only look at the pictures and appreciate them. Tried reading them again when I was in my 20s, couldn't understand it. And when I was in my 20s, I was in much lower modes than I was even in when I was in my childhood. Could not understand it to save my life. It was just like fog to me. And I couldn't explain it to myself because I could understand what each individual word was saying, but it wasn't getting any hold in my brain. And then I met devotees, and I would read things and I would say, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And within a matter of weeks, I could understand, at least to some degree. It wasn't fog to me anymore. It wasn't, it was the strangest thing. And I can only attribute it to the fact that if you're in the low modes, you're not going to get it, or you might get something. There was something attractive there, but it couldn't sink in. But with the association of a Bhaktin who'd been around for 2 years, she was able to explain it to me, very easily.
Hmm.
And of course, senior devotees who were there also. So, that's just an example of how, you do need a devotee association, because it's, at least I did for sure, because it just wasn't getting through to me at all. If I had taken it to heart when I was 10 years old, I wouldn't have gotten into all the mess I did when I was in my teens and 20s. But it just didn't sink in, and it didn't sink in until I was almost 30. So.
And yet somehow or other, receiving that book led you to the Association of Devotees.
Oh yeah. I had association for many years, starting from the age of 10. I met devotees when I was met them in not high school, but actually in high school too.
Hmm.
And, but it was, I think I just had a lot of stuff that I needed to work out, and I'm grateful I did, because, I'm hard-headed and I had to learn things the hard way. So I got that opportunity, but I was protected, while I was learning things the hard way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Mother Kamalini, did you have a comment to make?
Well, I just wanted to commend Tulsi Priya for sticking with it. Imagine many people give up. I know I also couldn't understand like Bhagavad Gita. I'm like, wow, well, I don't know what's going on. All I know is one verse. If thousands of suns were to rise in the sky at once, they might resemble the effulgence of that universal form, because it was very, graphic. So I could relate to that. Otherwise, I didn't know what was going on. So I never touched any Srimad Bhagavatam. I really liked Krishna book. But then when I moved into the temple and we had Bhagavatam class every day, then I was so amazed. I thought, if I can't understand Bhagavad Gita, how am I going to ever see my Bhagavatam? Because it's the postgraduate study. But yeah, gradually. But I guess many people, stick with it, or, something else will keep us there. The prasadam and the association keep us trying like that. And the whole
Prasadam's a huge factor.
Yeah.
I'm glad you stuck with it too. And the pictures in the books, sometimes I used to wonder why Prabhupada, but then I remembered those pictures would attract me, and they would, attract my imagination, and they're very, very powerful. And it's not an accident that Prabhupada wanted them in his books.
I came to the temple basically for one reason. One of the books that I received at the Ann Arbor Art Fair in 1978, was The Science of Self-Realization, the hardbound book. And in that book, there's a picture of Prabhupada at San Francisco Rath Yatra in, I think, 1969, maybe 70. And he's standing in front of a sea of devotees with his arms upraised and his mouth open, chanting something glorious. And I would look at that picture, and I wasn't like a drug-addled person. I had become free from all of these nonsense activities for at least a year. But I would look at that and just gaze on that picture, and I said, I've got to find out who this is. This picture is not from this world. And I had a mantra card from the devotee who I bought the books from. I went to the temple and I joined. It was, Hare Krishna.
What you're saying, Prabhu, it reminds me of another thing that I appreciated you saying in your class. You're saying that the spiritual master being present before us is our opportunity to serve Krishna, just like the deity being before us is our opportunity to serve Krishna, even with our present conditioned senses. And so when the spiritual master is inspiring us by his personal example, his presence, his words, and we can do some service for him, then that's our chance to serve Krishna right there. It's not like it's a pie in the sky when you die scenario. It's here's Krishna for you right now. What are you going to do about it?
Nice. Thank you. I have a friend who, anyway, to make a long story short, his first contact with devotees was through a book, Krishna book. He was visiting a friend's house. The Krishna book was he was waiting for his friend who was getting dressed or something. And there was a bookshelf in the apartment, and he saw Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, on this book. He pulled the book down, he looked at it, and he was looking through the introduction by George Harrison, this and that, and he read the Maha Mantra and some statement about this chanting will make your life sublime. And he looked at the book while his friend was getting dressed, and he said, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. I don't feel anything. Closed the book, put it back up on the shelf. And about a month later, I met him in a parking lot. And that was my old hometown, Plymouth, Michigan. Met him in the parking lot, got his name because the Sankirtan leader told me I should get the names of people who were interested and who were nice. Got his phone number. We called him the next Sunday. He came and joined the temple. So you don't know what power of these books. We think like, well, the book just ended up on somebody's shelf, or They weren't really interested in the book. They couldn't really understand the book. But those books are powerful, powerful. They are powerful presences. They're a powerful presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's present right there. So we can't see Krishna in our hearts even, you know. He's right there, but we can't see him. But somehow or other, he's come outside as the spiritual master, as the deities, and as these books. Hare Krishna. Is there
Prabhu,
anything else? Yes.
I was wondering